This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210. Streaming live worldwide, it's extraterrestrial radio, and we are glad that you can join us today. And without further ado, I wanted to bring in one of my idols and a really fantastic entertainer who was woodshedding back in the late 60s on the bandstand, has continued to have a prodigious career up until today. And next week, he'll be a guest of President Obama and Michelle Obama, the First Lady, hosting International Jazz Day 2016. Al Jarreau, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake. Bless your heart having me on and saying all those nice things about me. And isn't that sweet that we're going to have Washington, D.C. and the President hosting International Jazz Day? That's hey, man, that's right up there, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, I just, my only wish was that it wasn't just one day. I mean, you really were on the bandstand woodshedding back in the 60s. You'd have an engagement for a month at a time, 3 weeks at a time. And I get that they're doing this big blowout day, but there's something to be said for playing in the same venue for multiple days at a time, for the audience to get to know you really as a person. And I think that's one reason there's a lot of issues going on with jazz and with the different languages of music today, is because people don't get a chance to know these cats like yourself, because everything is so transient now, 26 gigs and 24 nights, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, you sure touched on something that is part of ancient history, where there was the opportunity to spend some time with folks on during an engagement. Right. It's become such a commercial venture for all the parallel professions, you know, promoters and agents and all of that. Those niceties kind of go by the wayside in order to get people in the seats and get them in and out. So. Yeah, I think it's one of the problems, in fact, Jake, that just as you're suggesting, of our appreciation these days for music. It's a different audience these days. It's a different promoter. I mean, you and I, and there's some people who called a friend and say, "Come over, I just got the new so and so album. Let's bring a burger and let's listen to the whole thing. Remember so and so that sat in on this." I don't know. I don't think it's like that anymore.
Right.
I think music is in passing, just like it's in passing when we're on an elevator, and I kind of feel that elevator music, you know, it numbs us. It's being just everywhere and being so insignificantly present that we get numb to it, and there's a different kind of appreciation. So I don't get to town and get to stay in town, come to the radio station, and so we do miss that real personal touch. But, you know, having said that, the United Nations getting involved with the Thelonious Monk Institute 5 or 6 years ago, and making sure that this brilliant form of music called jazz, you know, basically invented in America and played all over the globe now. It's amazing. I was just in Germany. These cats are playing music like like people from Chicago.
Yeah, they're
blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys. Oh man, you'd fall on the floor. Same in Paris. Big band, man. Just hauling the wood. I'm telling you, and playing solos that would just would make you go, oh my goodness, train would, oh my goodness, this, oh my. So yeah, this music that has always had that aspect of joy and happiness and peace on the bandstand, and this ambassadorship that the early ambassadors took around the world and gave people a glimpse into what happens in a democracy when you have a kind of freedom to be yourself, do what you want to do, and join with some other people and make a music that is fresh and new and exciting, played spontaneously with joy. That excited people, man. I'm telling you, people talk to me today about having had to listen to my music in a closet somewhere because somewhere in a Soviet country they weren't allowed to listen freely to what I was doing. So jazz is just a really important force, and I'm just tickled to death that the Obamas and of course the United Nations with UNESCO has decided to be a sponsor of Jazz Day internationally. 180 countries, on one day saying, "Yay, jazz!" Thank you.
No, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want to play this voice for you right now. Take a listen to it, and we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I wound up making some tapes, which I just released with the first volume of. But actually, Pete if he had stayed, would have wound up on that particular album for Al Jarreau with the George Duke Trio. And but in this case, it happens to be Al Checky, John Hurd, and myself. And from 1965, and we just there will be 2 more volumes of it. Doesn't sound the greatest, but it's historical gold, I think.
George, I want to tell you,
it's kind of where we began before we started recording.
All right,
that's a wonderful clip. Wonderful, George Duke.
Yeah, well, listen. This is a part of your history that, again, I am not into preservation. My parents were librarians. I'm into promotion of leadership, love, overcoming adversity, and the lineage of music. And Al Jarreau started his career at the half note with Al Checky, John Hurd, and George Duke. And I want you to break that down because I interviewed George 4 years ago, rest his soul. And I want you to tell us about how that came to be.
Well, yeah, very important part of my life and career, and you got it right. I was discovering my voice. I had been in Milwaukee playing with Les Zimber, who is a pianist from Hungary, who sat me down to listen to the jazz greats, including Diz and Train and Miles and those guys, and Bill Evans, and said, "Listen to these guys, and this is the stuff, baby. Come on, then come have lunch with me, and we rehearse. And tonight we play Satendal." And hey, I started that stuff 10 years before I got together with George. I had a sense of who I was, but with George Duke, I nailed it down more and started to swing a little bit harder. And we did a wonderful 4-year run at the half note right there in the Haight-Ashbury. I'm telling you, there were lava lamps and tie-dye T-shirts and zigzags around the corner.
No, I want to. It's funny because George sent me a CD of that, and my wife has struggles with a lot of the abstract kind of the fusion jazz that you were hearing in Germany that I play, but she loved the vibe there, and there was also like a what seemed to me to be a social consciousness effort going on top of the music. Am I right or wrong about that?
Yeah, at that time?
Yes.
Well, yes, the whole country was responding to a new kind of social consciousness that where civil rights and the anti-war movement were really important things that we were talking about during those days. So, yeah, kids were leaving home and going to the Haight-Ashbury where they could be with other young people from the University of San Francisco and from Berkeley who were getting together and saying, "No more war, and let's stop making chemicals to bomb people with." And yeah, so there was a whole other kind of consciousness, and the music of the time is music that we can all point at and say, well, yeah, that was the thrust of things. Janis Joplin, Grateful Dead, Gracie Slick, Jefferson Airplane, goes on, and there were guys like B.B. King
Sure.
playing on stage with them, Lightning Hopkins, Guitar Slim, and so they were the reach was real broad, but it wasn't including the kind of jazz that George and I were doing. So it was important for me and George that in the midst of all of that and that kind of music, we were having a nice little success at this place called the Half Note in San Francisco on Divisadero, right there, on the cusp of the Haight-Ashbury, people coming in. Well, it wasn't all hippies barefoot, because you had to wear shoes coming in the Half Note.
I love this. No, I mean, my show is, I am from the Duke Ellington School of Music. It's either good or bad. And what you just laid out there, but I don't want to get too carried away. I want you to talk to me.
Well, while you're getting carried away, I'm going to do a Duke Ellington program with a big band, NDR, Norddeutsche Rundfunk, in November. We'll do a bunch of cities in Germany. If we get lucky and the program is well liked, we might find our way to a few choice venues here. But it's an Ellington program.
I want to get you to.
Lush Life will be there, and Satendal and some others.
I want to get you to Tucson, Al. I mean, I just you talked about you and George playing a more burning type of jazz. Can you talk about the kind of jazz you were playing as opposed to the Hungarian pianist in Milwaukee?
Well, it was a lot alike. They were both a lot alike, and there were things from the Ellington songbook and the Basie soundbook. And at that time, I had found Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, and the vocalists who were the expression of that kind of thing, and kind of leading the way. And Double Six of Paris, not well known in America, but brilliant group that really sounded like Basie, because they were 6 people who double recorded and following the lead of Hendricks, Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross. And so I was doing that kind of songbook during that period of time. With Les Zimber, the 10-year period before that, well, let's call it 8 years, 6 or 8 years. I did a lot of show music, Broadway stuff, and still have a huge love for Broadway music. I followed a tradition that was that I hadn't begun, but I have often walked the street before, but the pavement always stayed beneath my feet before. All that once and I, several stories high. Yeah, swinging.
Swinging. I love this. Al Jarreau on fire. Here's the thing. You just brought up John Hendricks. I interviewed him a couple years ago. I want to read you this quote, see if there's any relevance to your career. He said, "The mafia gave us the opportunity. I worked for a branch of the mob that supported jazz in the Midwest. I was working at 12 years old with Art Tatum at a club called the Waiters and Bellman's Club, owned by the mafia. Both Art Tatum and I were able to start our careers because of these people. They gave us a chance to work there and grow in our work. The more you do it, the easier it gets." And I,
wow, what a revelation! I never heard that before. John never said that.
Well, that's the Jake Feinberg show. There's always new history to be made. And
always new history. What a brilliant guy, poet laureate.
Brilliant dude, very well. He got an A in speech class in Ohio, and nobody got an A. But here's the thing. You've already alluded to the fact that a lot of where jazz is digested is in Europe, and it seems to me that in America you can be a pop star, but the language of melodic improvisation and jazz has never resonated the way it should be. And then,
no, it has not.
And
you got it right. Good.
Can you talk to the audience about? I know you do a lot of promotion and education for music in schools. What are some of the things, not so much why it's never been accepted, but how do you push back against it so that younger cats who have had digital beats pushed into their ears for 20 years can hear space in the music and ultimately understand this American art form?
Well, of course, big part of the answer to that is getting the opportunity to hear it and enjoy it and find what you like inside the music. There's got to be an opportunity to hear it. and you can't come to enjoying those aspects of the music that you're just describing there unless you have the opportunity. As Americans, we are lazy. We are academically lazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know that? We've we've got some brilliant people who've done some brilliant things, but in schools we don't study the way people do abroad in other countries. Students really work their butts off in schools abroad, and so yeah, academically there's some things that we've neglected just generally about that have to do with the beauty of knowing, of knowledge,
right,
of learning, and the various subject matters, including the arts themselves. We just don't. We have never really truly embraced that tradition. It's all been very goal oriented. Learn some science so you can become a this or that or the other and have a good job.
How much of it factors into cultural bias? Some people would call it racism. How much of the fact that it's a black American art form, it's the only true American art form. It's just, to me, it's the irony of this International Jazz Day. Yes, jazz is an international language now, and it's really good that you're incorporating a completely world sound. But make no mistake, jazz came out of the blues, which came out of the church, which came out of this country. And it is a black American art form. So how much of this quote-unquote laziness has to do with the fact that people, by and large, our country does not want to accept where the roots of the music came from?
Well, I think I'm making a distinction between just general laziness as students and the whole and education and making demands on the student. I'm talking about that as one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You bring up a whole other aspect of why jazz has gone underappreciated in America, and I think you're quite right that there's something that its blackness has had a problem, crossing barriers in America. We're still embarrassed by the barriers that blackness is having to deal with right now today. And it's part of the discussion going on with our presidential candidates, So no great surprise that jazz has had a difficult time because it's black of its black origins. Well, I promise you, there are a lot of people who've gotten beyond that,
mm-hmm.
and there's an openness and excitement about learning new things, a curiosity, and people in Germany and France have are the new centers for jazz. We're doing okay. Lincoln Center okay too, but I'm telling you, there are more jazz festivals over there these days to embarrass us about what we're doing of the same sort with jazz festivals and making jazz music available.
Do you? No, I want to. This is so interesting. Talking to Al Jarreau here, just a legend. We'll be performing next week at the International, or this weekend, in fact, at the International Jazz Concert hosted by Barack and Michelle Obama. I'll be the first to tell you. I mean, as a 38-year-old father of two, I started my show 5 years ago because I was appalled at the treatment that Barack was receiving at that time.
Well, there it is.
All right, but
it's embarrassing.
I guess, do you see any kind of nuanced opportunity at this International Jazz concert for you, Al Jarreau, to sort of activate that social? I know what's going on. Black Lives Matter. It's going on in a different way now, but through the music, like with you and Duke at the half note, when there was that social consciousness, is there a way to sort of put it on the map in the States, because I talk to a bunch of cats that go to France or go to Europe. I mean, they'll have a jazz festival on the top of a hill. You'll say, how is that going to happen? 2,000 people show up. You know, so it's like, is there a way for you to get a socially conscious message across that might have some resonance on this international jazz concert?
Well, I'm always looking for that spark of inspiration. Come on, God, tell me how to do such and such. You know, I'm always looking for that, and so I haven't come across what that little aspect of that spark of inspiration that may cause things to kind of catch fire in a different kind of way. But I'm not alone. There are a whole bunch of us sitting around just like you are, trying to think of what can I do, what can I say to create a spark of interest in the black community that relates to Black Lives Matter, and at the same time alerts people to the fact that there's this form of music that continues today that has in its roots Black Lives Matter, and part of stepping out there and showing people what's important about what African Americans do is to demonstrate this form of music. It's rock and roll. Slash and Eric Clapton are following Diz and Train. Hello. Improvise.
Right.
Learn your instrument, get the discipline together, learn your instrument, and then be free. Then get free. These are one of a couple of the most wonderful attributes that jazz brings as an opportunity to the player. And
okay, but I'm going to counter you here in that Gary Bartz, the horn player I talked to last week on my show, and he made an interesting observation about younger students. Where you guys grew up in auditory fashion, you were able to pick out a song through ear. Okay, now younger cats are growing up learning to read, so they're reading music before they can even pick out a song through hearing. So it's very hard. That's not how Beethoven or Mozart or Louis Armstrong or probably Al Jarreau learned, and so they're learning backwards. And it's harder to develop your own individual sound. You can have monster chops, but if your ears are locked, it's going to be hard to improvise, don't you think?
Well, you know what? I haven't been aware that that's the tendency today, that people are reading and not appreciating, and that appreciating and finding what works for you inside a particular type of music before you learn how to read it and all. I am aware that, and embarrassed that young people, man, are reading bird tracks with blindfolders on at 80 paces. They can read their behinds off.
That's right, they can. But
I can just barely read my name.
Exactly, but I mean, that's the point. I mean, I've talked to Clyde Stubblefield, James Brown's drummer. He said, I don't know what I'm doing behind the drum kit. I just feel my soul. And that's
right.
and I wanted you to talk. This is more of a conceptual thing, but I wanted you to.
Well, it's got to get there.
I wanted you to talk.
It's got to get there, Jake.
I'm with you, but I want you to talk to the audience about. I mean, you are approaching this big day in jazz, but I mean, you've had a career built on love, and I wanted you to talk about your concept of love and how Al Jarreau brings love to the world.
Wow, Jake, you got a lot of concepts going on here today.
I'm making you move around. I'm making you move.
Yeah, we need more time than we have here.
A lot more.
But but love, maybe the most important aspect of whatever it is that we do is, does it contain love and caring and compassion? That's job one. That's job one, to take care of each other on this planet. Nobody should starve. Nobody should be homeless. Nobody should be without clothes. Nobody should be without the basic necessities. We're moving into we're already there. And it started with internal combustion engine. Work will be no more. We've got to decide whether a universal subsistence kind of check that people get in order to live and exist and subsist on this planet, get groceries, pay whatever rent that we pay, is due everybody, because the guy who has the magic wand and who is making gazillion dollars used my school system, used my roads, used everything that I did as Willie Jones and Stashu Pendowski to find people who made the magic wand that he now uses to get rid of workers. He has to take care of us.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that there's a lot of justification for people making gazillions of dollars and then putting nothing back into society. That's a callousness that bothers me.
Well, you're wrong. There is no justification for it. The justification is all wrong.
Right.
To the extent that it exists at all, it's all wrong. It's an inappreciation because of greed at the moment for what's going on around you. I mean, if you are Pfizer, you got people that I educated at my university that I spent my tax dollars on.
That's right. That's right.
Damn right.
That's right. And,
don't be telling me that you did it by your fucking self.
Dude, there we go. This is what, this is the kind of whatever. This is perfect. We need more time. I have one more question for you. Related to, you've done a lot of workshops. I think offhand I can remember Philadelphia and South Carolina. You're about getting music back into the schools. Ben Vereen is also very much into this. But Al, tell the audience how much being on the bandstand night after night helped you develop your own individual voice. And what I mean by that is so much of jazz and music education has moved into academia now. And I really believe the stifling of genres, you can go across the board from bluegrass to rock to jazz, has been stifled because I don't believe that you can really develop an individual sound unless you're on the bandstand 6 nights a week. And there are no venues anymore for younger cats to play at. So, I mean, when you go to these schools, how are kids supposed to get comfortable with their own voice if they're learning within the four walls of academia?
Well, that is a huge problem, and the only thing that I talk about is, if you have your chin on your chest and you're texting somebody about you're walking across the street now the light just turned green, use your brain power for something else and find some ways to invent and come up with venues, even if it's free playing, where people can come and play for free. I did open mic. I went and played for free in a coffee house. Hey, establish a joint. Nobody gets paid, but you can play for free. We'll get somebody to donate a sound system and come on and play. You got to think like that. Use your brain for something else other than texting.
And finally, could you just, we heard his voice before, but can you just put into perspective what George Duke brought to music and to the world?
Well, for me, it was this breadth of reach and open door policy about appreciating music and allowing appreciating various kinds of music and allowing various kinds of music into your life and becoming proficient at playing all of it. George Duke, epitomized that as much as anybody. I don't know if that's a goal to achieve, but it happened to me because of the same musical context that George grew up in. He grew up waking up in the morning, listening to Elvis Presley and rock and roll on the radio.
Little Richard.
Yeah. Little Richard and all those guys on the radio. And then in the afternoon, it was Catch a Falling Star and put it in your pocket, never let it fade. Pop music of the day. And that came in and made an impression somewhere in him. And then he listened to R&B. That came in. And so at any one time, on any one day, you could catch George on Soul Train singing like Philip Bailey,
right?
And at night on the funkiest station in Detroit, where you wanted to, where he had just appeared with Parliament Funkadelics. Nobody had that kind of reach, and it is a reach that at least needs to be acknowledged and talked about from time to time, so that young people understand that they don't have to be locked in to what their friends think is the stuff of the day, and their friends, of course, are hauled in by what's commercial and what those guys out there can make a dime playing.
Well, Al, I hope we can do part 2 and have a little more time, because I have a lot more stuff to get to you with. But I hope you go to this concert, and I hope you have a ball, and I hope you burn, and I also hope that that you can get some inspiration and find a way to keep pushing the consciousness forward in a musical fashion. Because
Jake, thank you, man. That's a wonderful wish for me. Peace, joy, happiness, and more jazz, and find some inspiration there in Washington, D.C. as we do this International Jazz Day. Thank you, Jake, and thank you for your work, your questions, your thoughtfulness about this. Press on, man. Don't stop. And yes, this is just the beginning for you and me.
Oh, I can't wait.
We need to spend more time talking about just these very things. I mean, because they involve jazz, but they involve other issues too, don't they?
You're darn right, man. Much love to you, Mr. Jarreau, and
you too,
talk to you
Jake.
soon,
God
man.
bless you all out
All right,
there.
now. Talk to you
Okay,
soon.
bye.
Bye-bye. We'll be right back on The Jake Feinberg Show.